There is a painful difference between being loved and being welcomed. Most children are loved in some basic parental sense. They are fed, supervised, protected, spoken about with pride, and defended when the outside world threatens them. But many children spend their early years trying to answer a quieter question, one they almost never say aloud, because they do not yet know how. Not, do my parents love me? The deeper question is, do they like being with me when I am not performing, not efficient, not convenient, not especially impressive? Children can survive strict rules. They can survive hearing no. They can survive boredom, frustration, and ordinary disappointment. What wounds them more deeply is the repeated feeling that their presence produces strain, that they are managed more than enjoyed, tolerated more than welcomed, corrected more than known. They may never phrase it that way, but they feel it in the body with terrifying accuracy. Adults often miss this because they confuse duty with delight. Duty is essential. Children need adults who show up consistently, maintain structure, get dinner on the table, keep appointments, enforce boundaries, and do the unglamorous work that makes childhood possible. But duty alone does not answer a child's question about relational status. A child does not simply need to know that care will be delivered. They need to know that their company is not an exhausting tax on the household, that their curiosity, stories, odd humor, repeated questions, enthusiasm, and emotional weather do not make them fundamentally too much. This is where family life becomes psychologically decisive. Because children are constantly reading micro-signals that adults dismiss as insignificant. The sigh before answering, the eyes still on the phone while the child talks, the smile that looks manufactured, the impatience when a story takes too long, the laughter reserved for guests but not for them, the way logistics get full attention while their inner life gets fragments. Imagine a child bursting into the kitchen with a story about a game, a drawing, a bug they found, a joke they made, a song they want you to hear, or a wildly detailed recap of something objectively trivial. Adults tend to evaluate these moments based on content. Is this important? Is this efficient? Am I too busy? The child is evaluating something else entirely. What happens to my parents' face when I bring them myself? Do they brighten, brace, or merely endure? Children are extraordinarily sensitive to this because a parent's attention is not just attention. It is a mirror in which the child studies their own social worth. When your attention lands with warmth, the child learns, often unconsciously, that being themselves can create pleasure rather than inconvenience. When attention lands with chronic impatience, amusement without engagement, or habitual partial presence, the child may conclude that love is real, but delight is reserved for easier people. This does not happen in one dramatic moment. It happens through accumulation. The phone test matters. The child starts speaking and watches whether you keep scrolling. The timing test matters. Do you only seem relaxed with them when they are useful or quiet? The story test matters. Are you willing to enter the child's world for 30 seconds without making them feel ridiculous for caring about it? The repair test matters. If you miss the moment, do you circle back? Or does the child simply learn not to bring things as often? Over time, these tiny scenes teach one of two lessons. Either, my presence can create connection, or my presence mostly creates pressure. No child becomes that conclusion consciously. They simply start adapting to it. They talk less. They become self-entertaining. They make themselves easier to parent by becoming less visible. Adults often praise this shift. In reality, it can be the early architecture of emotional withdrawal. One reason this matters so much is that children build self-esteem less from abstract compliments than from relational experience. You can tell a child they are wonderful all day long, but if your face regularly says, "Please be less," the body will trust the face. If affection appears mostly at bedtime or in staged moments, but irritation dominates ordinary interaction, the child will internalize the ordinary interaction. This is why some children from outwardly loving homes still grow up feeling strangely unwanted. They were not unloved. They were insufficiently delighted in. That difference sounds sentimental until you watch what it predicts later. People who felt merely tolerated often become adults who monitor how much space they take up. They apologize for talking too long. They feel guilty when excited. They pre-soften every request. They become highly skilled at being non-intrusive, not because they are naturally modest, but because somewhere deep down they learn that the safest version of closeness is the least demanding one. There is a cruel irony here. Parents who chronically signal toleration rather than welcome often do not mean to. Many are overloaded, overscheduled, digitally fragmented, financially stressed, emotionally undernourished, or carrying private exhaustion no child can understand. Others love deeply, but grew up in homes where affection was practical rather than playful, where children were protected, but not especially enjoyed. They do not know what delight looks like in motion. They may think family affection means providing, teaching, sacrificing, and worrying. All of that matters, but a child also needs moments that feel gloriously unnecessary. Shared laughter with no lesson attached. Listening with no hurry attached. Curiosity with no correction attached. A parent who can join the child's strange little world, not because it is useful, but because the child is there. Those moments do not spoil children. They humanize them. This is why contempt, even in miniature, is so dangerous. Eye-rolling at a child's enthusiasm, mocking their interests, acting burdened by their bids for connection, treating their need for attention as manipulation by default. Responding to their joy with coolness because you are trying to keep them grounded. These are not neutral habits. They teach the child that their interior life is something adults bear rather than welcome. Once that lesson settles in, the child often begins to split love from enjoyment. My parents love me because they have to. People enjoy other people. That split can follow a person into adulthood with astonishing force. They become deeply suspicious of being wanted for themselves. They may trust duty more than desire. They may choose relationships where they are useful but not cherished, because usefulness feels safer, more predictable, less humiliating than being truly enjoyed. Notice how often modern parenting intensifies this without meaning to. The child becomes a project. Their grades, nutrition, screen time, extracurriculars, safety, behavior, sleep, mental health, and future become constant managerial concerns. Management has its place, but children who are always optimized and rarely enjoyed feel the difference. They start to experience parental attention as surveillance rather than delight. Every conversation becomes a hidden performance review. How was school? Did you finish that? Why are you behind? What happened there? Did you brush? Did you text me back? Did you say thank you? Again, none of these questions are wrong. The problem is ratio. If a child experiences far more monitoring than spontaneous pleasure in your company, they begin to associate relationship with evaluation. That is one of the fastest ways to produce polite distance. The antidote is not becoming endlessly available or artificially cheerful. Children can sense fake performance too. The antidote is to let your presence communicate with some consistency that the child is not merely a responsibility you are carrying. They are a person whose existence can bring pleasure into the room. This may sound obvious, but in practice, it is radical. Put the phone down when they begin the story. Ask one real follow-up question about the thing you do not care about. Laugh without making them earn it through impressiveness. Let them interrupt your efficiency occasionally and survive the interruption without turning their need into your martyrdom. Make eye contact that is not always paired with instruction. Sit beside them when nothing is wrong. Let there be moments where your child is not improving, performing, confessing, or complying, and you still seem glad they are there. That kind of delight changes a child's inner economy. The child who feels welcomed is more likely to bring the hard things too. They trust that they do not need to become perfectly easy in order to remain connected. They can tolerate correction better, because correction is not the only flavor of closeness they know. They can accept limits without concluding they are fundamentally irritating. They can share weirdness without immediate shame. They can recover from conflict because they have evidence that the relationship contains more than management. In other words, delight is not a luxury added on top of discipline. It is one of the conditions that makes discipline humane and effective. If you were a child who was mostly tolerated, you may feel this truth in your adult body before you can explain it intellectually. You may become very skilled at not imposing. You may wait for proof before trusting warmth. You may feel disproportionately moved when someone listens to your trivial story as though it matters. You may become the person who is easy to be around because you do half the relational work in advance. And you may secretly wonder why intimacy still feels slightly precarious, even with people who claim to love you. Often the answer lives in those early micro-moments. Love was present, welcome was inconsistent, protection was there, pleasure in your presence was harder to detect. That history can make you treat every relationship like a place where you have to earn the right to take up emotional space. If you are parenting now, the invitation is not to become guilty about every distracted response. No household can sustain total emotional availability. The invitation is simply to ask a more revealing question. When my child comes toward me, what does my face usually tell them about themselves? Not, what do my values say? Not, what do I intend? What does the repeated emotional reality communicate? Families are shaped less by ideals than by frequency. If the answer makes you uneasy, that discomfort can be useful. It means you are capable of noticing the difference between loving your child and letting them feel enjoyed by you. That distinction may shape their future relationships more than many of the larger decisions you obsess over. And if this helped you name something hidden but powerful, subscribe. This channel is for people who want to understand what family life teaches beneath the visible rules, the deeper signals that become a child's emotional blueprint. And send this video to one person truly close to you, someone with whom you want to build healthier, wiser relationships around the children in your lives. Sometimes the most generous thing we can offer a child is not another lesson, not another correction, not another perfectly optimized plan, but the unmistakable feeling that their presence does not merely require us, it delights us. Because children can survive not getting everything they want. What is much harder to survive cleanly is the feeling that their existence regularly strains the room. A child who feels welcomed develops a different posture in life. They speak more freely. They recover faster from embarrassment. They ask more honestly. They carry less shame around being seen. And one day, they become adults who do not have to apologize quite so much for being alive in front of other people. That is not a small gift. It is one of the foundations of belonging. A useful test is this. When your child is not being efficient, educational, or impressive, can you still enter their world without resentment? Not forever, not every time, but enough that they do not experience your attention as something they must strategically earn. Children know the difference between a parent who occasionally says yes from generosity and a parent who seems to be counting the cost of every minute. The latter kind of home often produces children who become prematurely adult in the wrong ways. They are considerate, but the consideration is edged with vigilance. They can read when you are tired before you admit it. They can feel when they have overstayed their emotional welcome. They develop exquisite manners around other people's bandwidth, while remaining oddly disconnected from their own. That looks mature. It often feels lonely. There is also a link here to behavior that adults frequently misunderstand. Children who feel merely tolerated often become either unusually compliant or unusually provocative. The compliant child is trying to reduce relational friction. The provocative child is trying to force a clearer answer to the question, "Do I matter enough to move you?" In both cases, the underlying need can be similar. They are looking for signs that they are more than an obligation. That is why traditional behavioral approaches sometimes fail in these homes. Consequences address the surface action, while the child is still asking a deeper relational question. If the family never answers that question directly through delight, welcome, and emotionally alive attention, the behavior either hardens or goes underground. And one final thing deserves to be said clearly. Enjoying your child does not mean approving every mood, joining every activity, or pretending the hard parts are easy. It means refusing to let efficiency become the emotional religion of the household. Childhood is inconvenient by design. Stories ramble, questions repeat, feelings arrive badly timed. Curiosity interrupts productivity. Delight rarely presents itself as useful. But the children who thrive most in family life are not the ones whose parents eliminated all inconvenience. They are the ones whose parents could occasionally let inconvenience become intimacy. A conversation at the wrong time, a joke when you were busy, a strange interest you entered for a minute, a sigh you swallowed before it became a lesson in burdensomeness. Those are the moments that tell a child, maybe for life, I am not just tolerated here, I belong here. And belonging is not only about safety. It is about the far more intimate knowledge that your presence can bring warmth instead of weariness, delight instead of damage control. Children build their future relationships around that expectation, more than most adults ever realize. That expectation becomes a way of standing in the world.